In early April 1980, there were 2 points of major excitement in our home. One, my mother was set to give birth any day, and The Empire Strikes Back was barely a month away. My love affair with all things strawberry shortcake had yet to fully demand equal time from Star Wars, and my love for all things Princess Leia was paramount. And while I was excited about my soon-to-be little brother, it was not without stress. My mother had been plagued with troubled pregnancies after my birth, and we lost my little sister to sudden infant death syndrome a few years before. There had been one miscarriage before my brother that had been devastating to the family, and her pregnancy with my brother was not without concerns. So as we entered the last days and weeks of her pregnancy, there was tension, only exasperated by visiting family as my mother's parents arrived from out of town, and family in town were suddenly hovering more closely and more frequently. If I had issues with the focus being on the new baby, and all of the fear and concerns on that baby arriving, I don't actually remember. I only remember being excited by the soon-to-release Empire Strikes Back, being intrigued by Strawberry Shortcake and her friends, who hadn't shown up in any stores near us. Or if they had, they were selling out before we got to the stores. Also, the store pegs, while finally filled with plenty of Star Wars figures after 1978 was hit or miss as Kenner filled orders, these were filled with figures I already had. I was spoiled, so I had all 21 of the minifigures, and even had extra Jawas. My mother loved the little guy and would pick him up here and there. I had several Leias, C-3POs, R2-D2s, R5-D4s, Death Star droids, and Power droids, as aunts, uncles, and grandparents seemed to know Leia and the droid characters were my favorite, and intended to bring these as gifts for birthdays and when visiting. I also played a lot with these figures, and had broken and lost several Leias over and over. My C-3POs were often without hands, as the brittle plastic used for the vac metal figure easily broke off during playtime. There had also been an incident when I had taken an extra set of Leia, R2, and C-3PO to school, and they had been stolen from my desk. I blame my classmate Zachary. He was the worst. Wherever you are now, Zachary, suck it. Then the day came where we had to rush to the hospital so my brother could arrive in this world. I remember it being a long process, and I remember a succession of people coming through, and me sitting in a waiting room with a parade of aunts, uncles, grandparents, and family friends. My mom was obviously not able to check in on me, but my dad did. He got minutes and times between all the stresses of what my mom was going through to make sure and check in. He brought me chips, candy, and even those pink Hostess snowballs from the vending machine, a snack I still have an affinity for. I spent a lot of that time playing with my Colorform set. I had a fancy Muppet Show one with puppets, and a Mickey Mouse one that had 3 levels and cut-out sections to suggest light-up features. One of those days, toward the end of it, when things were particularly stressful for the adults, my dad came to get me from the waiting room so we could get out of the hospital for a little bit. I suspect this was as much for him as it was for me. The hospital was located across the street from a mall, and one that had a pretty robust food court, as well as a toy store. I don't remember what we ate, but we did have Orange Julius. Strawberry, as I liked strawberry better than orange. To this day, orange-flavored stuff, not my favorite. And after, before we went back to the hospital where the waiting area awaited, with family or family friends, we stopped by the mall's toy store. The toy store had a very quintessential late 1970s patterned carpet. There were bright yellow boxes and blue circles and red triangles with green in between. It was a little like the carpet from The Shining, except brightly colored and in a toy store instead of a haunted hotel. We first checked the aisle where one would expect to find strawberry shortcake dolls, but there were still none to be found. To be honest, at the price range the box dolls were at, it was probably for the best, as my dad had only recently graduated college and we were still pretty broke, especially with the new baby coming and all the associated medical bills. If my dad was feeling any pressure at getting back to the hospital, where my mom was still in her complicated labor process, he didn't show it. I didn't feel rushed as we wandered the toy store aisles, slowly making our way to the inevitable destination, the Star Wars aisle. There, to my surprise, were new figures, figures I'd never seen, and on a different card. It said Empire Strikes Back in red. It may seem foreign in the current model of Star Wars releases, but after getting caught with no product on shelves when the first Star Wars came out, Kenner had managed to get some product out for Empire before the movie. There had been rumors at school of kids finding these figures, but none of them had actually brought the figures to prove it. Zachary claimed he had all of them, but he was probably lying. Zachary was the worst. There, among the 21 figures I already knew, loved, and owned on Empire Strikes Back cards, were a snowtrooper, a thin silverish gray droid with red eyes and miniguns, Han Solo in a parka, a Bespin guard. What's Bespin? I remember asking my dad as he read the name to me. But all of these were forgotten and less interesting as my eyes fell upon the new Princess Leia. Leia Organa, Bespin Gown. There was that word again, Bespin. What was Bespin? My dad didn't know. But since there was a Bespin guard, he suggested that maybe Bespin was a place. Red was my favorite color, and the pink vinyl cape with the cool flowery pattern, I had no choice but to immediately fall in love with this new Princess Leia figure. My dad seemed happy that I was suddenly enthralled with the new toy. My assumption is he was just relieved I would have something to occupy my time. My assumption to this day is that he could only afford one of the figures. The mall toy store would have priced it a little bit more than it was at the discount stores, where we usually got my Star Wars figures. Or he probably would have gotten me another one. But in the moment, I didn't care. This single brand new Leia was more than enough. Once we were back in the waiting room, I used a potted plant as the playset and got lost in the world of Star Wars. One of my own creation. Bespin Leia quickly replaced White Gown Leia from the original 12 figures as my favorite Star Wars figure. She even replaced my large-sized Leia as my favorite toy, who at that point was nearly a year old. I lost and broke 3 or 4 of the Bespin Leia in the first year, and had several replacements. I didn't even mind when we went to see Empire Strikes Back opening weekend when the Bespin Gown outfit was on screen for only one set of scenes. From the Bespin apartment where Leia laments about missing 3PO, she shares a moment and a kiss with Han, and declares she doesn't trust Lando, just before Lando arrives to flatter her before delivering her and her traveling companions to Darth Vader and Boba Fett. If anything, the reduced screen time for the outfit made it more exciting. There were fewer defined stories for this outfit, so I was able to create the most elaborate adventures for Leia and the droids who were her companions. At some point later, I added a Lobot figure who became Leia's right hand in the long hours I spent creating adventures for her and Lobot to go on in the Cloud Car, crossing the galaxy in hopes of finding where Boba Fett had taken Han Solo in Carbonite. Bespin Leia is also a major mile marker in my life. I got my first Bespin Leia at the toy store in the mall across the street from the hospital where my brother was born. 33 years later, when my mother was in the same hospital dying, my brother and I went across the street to the mall to get food and decompress. The once magnificent mall that had been one of the best places to go shopping as a kid, it was always the destination for holiday shopping. It was like most malls in 2013, and more so today. Slowly dying with many closed and dark storefronts, and few, if anyone, wandering the halls and corridors. The restaurant where we'd all sat with one of my late uncles the last time he'd flown home to visit from New York, eating many giant heaping plates of nachos, covered in preposterous amounts of toppings and cheese, was long gone, as was the toy store where I'd gotten Bespin Leia. The space was still there, and surprisingly the carpet was still in there, but it was now some sort of health supplement store, and it was so tiny, so much tinier than I remembered. And it smelled weird. On the way toward the mall's exit, we passed a Toys R Us outlet store, and I insisted we stop. What kind of adult collector would I be if I didn't check out a toy store? There on the shelf was the vintage collection Bespin Leia. The cards of the vintage collection are recreations of the original cards, so there was an odd, strange, deja vu feeling. Of course I had to buy it. I hadn't been able to find her anywhere on toy shelves back home. Home was now the Pacific Northwest rather than Central Texas. And she was only popping up online for prices that were horribly out of my then meager budget, as I was between jobs and really shouldn't have even spent the $15 to buy that vintage collection Leia. But how could I not? I opened her in the waiting room later. I had to take a break, as seeing your mom on ventilators and machines keeping her breathing is hard, no matter what age you are. And for a second, as the plastic bubble ripped from the card, there was a brief sparkle of magic. A little bit of time travel where the smell of the hospital and the new action figure plastic smell conspired to transport me back to 1980, when a brand new Princess Leia action figure had filled me with hope and stories and a sense of wonder. Rather than 2013, where a brand new Princess Leia action figure filled me with a bittersweet version of nostalgia and a longing for a simpler time that the smell of plastic can never fully recapture. My mom died the day after my brother's birthday in 2013 in the same hospital where he'd been born, 33 years apart, an entire lifetime between them. Both events brought major changes to my life in every way, and they were punctuated by Princess Leia and Bespin Gown. To my mom, wherever she is now, and she's somewhere, because like Carrie Fisher once said, no one's ever really gone, they're just over there. I miss you and wish you were just a phone call away. You were the one person in the family who truly got my adult collecting bullshit. And to my little brother, who is now a grandparent, I hope you have a lovely birthday this year. I wish we were closer geographically, but to paraphrase Space Mom, no one's ever really gone. I'm just over here.